So, thank you so much, Amit, for joining our second Leaders Fireside Chat, where we engage in conversation with some of the most respected and experienced thought leaders in the HR fraternity to gain insight into their unique perspectives and learn more about the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. For the benefit for those that are going to watch this, a quick round of introductions. It's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest for the day, Mr. Amit Sharma. As the Vice President, Head, People and Culture of Volvo Group India, Amit is a recognized leader in the human resources field and is highly respected for his strategic leadership and expertise. With over 2 decades of experience in roles across various industries, he has demonstrated a proven track record of developing high-performing teams and has received numerous awards for excellence in HR business partnering and team development. Also with us is Avinash Bichali, now co-founder at Global Talent Exchange. Avinash is a senior business professional with more than 2 decades of experience in talent strategy and also has been a strategic advisor to industry leaders in people function. He's grown multiple startups in this area ground up and is currently on a mission to mobilize talent from global tech hubs to bridge the talent gap in India. As for myself, my name is Samira and I am the Content Strategy Head for Global Talent Exchange. Over to you, Avinash.
Thank you, Samira, for that fabulous introduction. So just to start off on a slightly lighter note, Amit, we know you from a professional side. Could you just tell us a little bit about your outside work, personal aspect, your experience through your PSU, public sector to the private sector, and a little bit about yourself.
That's an interesting question, but thanks for having me here. I think it's as a great forum to share some of the thoughts about HR and industry over here. So you asked me about my background or what we do or what has been my experience. It's been a quite interesting journey. Having seen both the sides of the industry, typically as we look at it, on one hand, the PSUs, which is considered a typical a government sector, and on the other hand, we have an MNC kind of a culture. It's pretty interesting that there will be many similarities in the both, which people may not really, they're very counterintuitive to some people in terms of the ways of working. And then there are also differences. But it's been a fascinating journey all through the last almost 24 years now that I've started working. Interesting thing which has been, Avinash, has been the larger yearn in me to not settle and just get comfortable with things. I think that's something which I would say would define one of the key aspects about me, because sometimes you tend to get very cozy in a place, and the moment you get into that kind of a zone, in my view, the learning stops. And that's when you stop applying yourself. That's when you stop making a difference, because then you are so comfortable in what's happening around and you are just going with the flow. One of the key thing was, how do you really continue to ensure that that you don't get that coziness anywhere. The moment I felt a bit of a coziness or things are really getting a bit not too comfortable, the idea was, okay, let me find a new challenge and let me kind of pick up something different as such. And that's how it has been my journey all across, whether in the same company taking up different roles. Even in Indian Oil, when I was there 7 years, I kind of moved across almost 4 roles. Not many people used to do that because once you are there, and generally people retire 35, 40 years, and for them it's about, okay, let me continue with the whatever flow it comes. But for me it was, okay, I have done this, let me take on something else. Done recruitment, let me get into performance management. Done performance management, let me get into employee engagement. Every 1.5, 2 years I should tell my boss what next for me, what else is there. And same is the case when I was with Philips or J&J. So my career has been primarily around that. The key aspects has been to continue to look at something new, do something new, something different, challenge myself to get into zones which had not been earlier, and then try to make a difference over there. I can tell you there was huge amount of advice to me by many people. Hey, why are you leaving a PSU? It's a settled career for life, but sometimes your ambitions are very different.
Absolutely. So you're saying change has been constant, and I think with that, I guess, comes a lot of learning because when you kind of explore new areas, there's a lot of learning here, Amit. Fantastic. Thanks for that. So, in the light of recent change, challenges that we're seeing in the industry, what are your thoughts on the current situation, and from your experience, how do you think companies should navigate these? I'm sure, in the past, you've seen a few of these kind of situations, right? I mean, 2 decades now, I'm sure you've seen a couple of recessions and hard times. How is this one different, right? Coming out of the pandemic, and then there's, the great attrition happening, companies hiring over the roof, and then there's a sudden slump. So what is your current take on this particular situation?
My view is that at this point of time, organizations are getting more reactive than what the real picture is. As we really look at it, the Indian story is still very positive, Avinash. If you look at all the macroeconomic parameters, they are pretty strong, whether it's our GDP growth, whether it's our the stock market performance, the companies' revenues which are being reported in the last quarter. Things are pretty good out here. Somewhere, if you really look at it, we talk. It's been 1 year that we are facing the situation of Ukraine war, and if you look at India's growth story in the last 1 year, it still has been pretty much strong. So sometimes, in my view, we tend to kind of over extrapolate some of these external geopolitical situations and tend to do a more of a knee-jerk reactions in organizations, which then leads to a larger alienation of the workforce, and that's something which people really need to understand, that people understand when there is a recession. Like COVID was a situation where there was completely no demand. There was a huge slump. The entire economic activity across the world came to a standstill, and people understood what happened. But at this point of time, in my view, when you speak to people around it, India is still growing, and why we are still hearing all these situations. So somewhere, in my view, it's been more a knee-jerk reaction in this situation than what it is really. Sometimes what also happens is that in such situations, even a small action gets also exaggerated sometime in the media. Even if somebody is just getting rid of the low performers, but suddenly there is a news that so many people are being laid off, and it may not be really a layoff in a strict sense. It may be just people who are annual exercise. When people who are not really performing well, they do move on. But to me, it's a reactive approach. But if you go a bit of a few months earlier, last year we were like hiring in droves, everybody, and people were really getting into situations where you had candidates with multiple offers. They were negotiating with, I have a 40% offer, can you give me 70%, then only I'll come. Or till the last day we never knew people are going to join us or not. That also kind of was a sudden boom. That was also in my view a knee-jerk reaction. So somewhere the organization felt that now it's only going to be the tech talent, the IT talent, which is going to kind of take the organization forward. And suddenly, when that thing didn't really happen the way it was envisaged, and now we have again started getting into the other side. You look at the organizations which are typical brick and mortar, you won't see these kind of actions there. Generally, all the news which you see in the market is predominantly those new age organizations which are really getting into this zone of action reaction. And you will actually see a lot of stability when it comes to the brick and mortar industry, the traditional backbone, which I would still say that India still has a backbone of manufacturing. Those services is growing pretty fast. that backbone is still pretty strong, and there we don't see these kind of action reaction approach which is really happening. But the key piece is that I would always say that in such situations, whenever, even if there's a downturn, the way an organization treats an employees at that point of time really determines the real employer brand and the attractiveness of that employer or of that organization. Even if you look at the COVID situation 2 years back, there are organizations which continued with their workforce. There are organizations which really supported their workforce in that time rather than just blindly reducing headcounts. And today those organizations are really reaping the dividends because people realize that they were there with them in their tough times. So to me, India is still a growth story. In India, we would have a demand. Our fundamentals are pretty strong. I think we just need to be balanced in our approach, both in terms of hiring as well as layoff. We shouldn't get into those quick reactions just because the world is hiring. So everybody, we start looking at it. If the world is laying off, we should also start doing that. I think that's where the HR people also have to step up in a way and be that sounding board in those management team meetings when those decisions are being made. That, hey, is it really a need, or are we just copying the world or doing things which other organizations are trying to do?
Thank you, Amit. That was really insightful. And you mentioned something about the anxiety of the workforce. Obviously, because of so many changes, it's leaving everyone really scared. So, I mean, from your experience, could you draw out a little bit about how companies can actually go about these changes? Like, hiring in droves to tech layoffs, mass layoffs. How do they adapt?
No, the key piece is fundamentally you need to first understand in HR what are you really understanding your business well or not. And when you say understanding the business, I'm not talking about how you make money. That's fun. You will hear it from everywhere. Your business's strategy 3 years down the line or 4 years down the line, what does it really want to achieve? If you're not glued on to that, you will always be living in the present. Because in HR, if you really want to be relevant, you have to live in the future. And living in the future means understanding, where my business is going few years down the line in terms of whether we are getting into a new set of businesses, whether we are branching out, we are consolidating, we are expanding, we are going to continue in the same way, whatever the strategy is. If you are glued on to that, and that's when you start working today, then there'll be a much more, I would call it a process-driven approach. Then you will have a very clear workforce plan. And when you have a clear workforce plan, then you are able to know, okay, this is a kind of a talent I would need 3 years down the line, so I better start building it now. Or this kind of a talent I'm not going to have 3 years down the line because probably I'm exiting that business. So how do I really broadly, gradually taper it down, or maybe reskill that talent to something else if it's possible, if those people are scalable or they have that learning agility or the competence to get picked it up in that field. So HR needs to actually look at much more deeper into the processes. One is understand the business in the future, what's going to happen, look at the current workforce, see where the gaps are, and then look at the ramping up or ramping down in that context, not something like firefighting, that today I need 400 people, tomorrow I don't need 300 people. That approach just can't work. There is like it's a crude example, I would say, but it's still a very relevant example. It's like going to the market every morning to get labor, and the evening say, okay, you have done your job, and then you are out, and tomorrow morning I'll look at it again. We can't have that. So that balance has to be maintained, and for that, understanding of the future of the business is very critical. Once you have that lens on, your processes will be much better, your actions in HR will be much better, and people will understand why you are doing what you are doing, because then there's a logic behind it which is communicated to everybody. See, people understand that. One thing which I have learned in life is that if you communicate to people with the right reasons, they understand it. Even if you're giving them a tough message, you're giving them a message which is about, about salary cuts or job cuts or transfers or anything. If you have a real solid reason which is explainable and which can be shared with the people fully understand that. People are not unreasonable. Somehow we tend to kind of believe that we'll not share information and then try to and then to create all those stories in between and get into those actions, and that's what creates that imbalance as you talked about.
Very interesting there, Amit. So you're suggesting, long-term planning, business partnering, reskilling, and making the talent relevant, for the future need. I mean, fantastic points here, Amit. Let's dwell a little bit, on the industry itself. Right, Amit? Like we spoke about the shift, the transformation that the auto industry is actually going through. While the industry itself is growing at a very, very healthy pace, there's also a transformation happening from the combustion engines to the EV space, right? And it's happening at a very, very rapid pace. And how are we, as a country, India, compared to the rest of the globe within this space? Do you think over the next few years we will be able to kind of catch up with the rest of the globe and say that we are the leaders here in the EV space? And the impact that it'll have overall. I mean, I know this is a slightly longer debate here on this, but would like to hear your views here on this.
EV is, I would say, not just EV, alternate fuels is the future. EV is one of the alternate fuels which is there. We have hydrogen fuel cell technology which is being developed equally there, and then there are other technologies which are parallelly being worked on. It was always very clear. I'll again go back to my Indian Oil days, 23 years back. We used to say that oil is going to still have its life, and after that those reserves will empty out, and we need to look at what will be the future sources of energy. So I think that transition was always in the sight. Earlier it was very long term. Now it's really coming up to a much more closer in terms of the actions. Now, India, again, if I would zoom out from a industry standpoint, we see government really incentivizing a lot when it comes to the alternate fuels as well as the EV transition. This itself is a big boost to the industry, because when you have the government support towards it, whether it in the forms of exemptions, tax exemptions, the GST rates on EV vehicles are much lower. The road tax registration on the EV vehicles are much lower. So you see, there is one hand, there's a larger systemic approach towards incentivizing people to move into more sustainable forms of energy to have the vehicles powered in. Now, at the same time, when we look at the industry, we see that there's a transition which is already happening. Passenger vehicles, the transition is much ahead. Commercial vehicles, it's still a bit slow because there the challenges are still much different, because it's more of a highway travel. And in highway travel, the biggest challenge today still is the charging infrastructure. The highway travel is still, it's about, the larger adaptation of that product towards the Indian climates. So some of these products, when you look at it, especially which are designed in the West, they're more designed for the colder climates. So the energy drain in a tropical country like ours is much higher. So there is parallelly work going on, I would say, across the industry to really have products which are relevant to our kind of an ecosystem and environment. But that's what the future is going to be. We also typically tend to believe that overall market for the IC engines will come down to let's say about 8 to 10% in long term. There will be still some market left for that. It will not be able to completely become zero, but that will be about 8 to 10%, and predominantly the world will move to a different technology, both electric as well as fuel cell or other products as such. So and if you look at some of the state governments, in terms of the city vehicles, you see a lot of demand, all the tenders which are coming out for electric buses now. In Bangalore, I see a lot of electric buses now running on the local routes, and more state governments are moving towards that. So that transition is happening. Passenger vehicles, the transition is much more faster. Commercial vehicles, it will take some bit of a more time, but that is going to be the future, which we really now see that, and this will happen very quickly. We have seen the technology changes which have happened, whether it comes to mobile phones, whether it comes to the cameras, all of that, when the change happens, it happens very quickly. We are at that point now where it's now going to, the pace of change is going to increase much more. There's always a bit of a slow beginning at the at the initial level, and then the curve starts to really move up. We are, in my view, at that moment where the curve is now going to fundamentally take a much higher slope in terms of the adoption, both on the passenger vehicle side as well as on the commercial vehicle side. We have recently, in the last, in the Construction Expo last week, we've launched an electric excavator in one of our, stalls here. So imagine the change which is happening, from the IC engines to that.
Wow, I mean, that's brilliant. You are saying that we are at an inflection point when it comes to EVs and alternate fuel, adoption that's kind of happening at a mass scale, more essentially in the commercial, not in the commercial, I mean, in the, private vehicle segment, and then the commercial vehicle is still, kind of trying to catch up. And interesting also to see construction equipment, also getting there, very, very soon. So just a lead-in question here, Amit. While the industry is moving at a super pace, in terms of adoption and stuff, do we have the depth of the knowledge that is required to, kind of foresee for the next 5 years, 10 years? I mean, do we have the talent enough? Or is the talent being imported from, other geographies? That's the question, Amit.
But that's a very, very relevant question, because most of the talent which we currently have employed, I would say across all the automotive companies, is the one which is super, competent when it comes to the IC engine technology. But when it comes to the challenge, talent around the alternate fuels, it is scarce, because that technology is still continuously being developed, and we don't have that depth of talent in the country. But the good part is that talent is getting developed pretty soon now at a much faster rate than we had seen here. Earlier, getting a person in the market who understands the EV was extremely difficult. 2 years back, if you would have asked me this question, I would have said it's a very, very rare thing. Today, that thing is changing, because people are also understanding that they are working towards upskilling themselves, and they are presenting themselves into those areas. Even people who are existing in the organization, they also are picking up knowledge around alternate fuels, or on powertrains which are electric driven, or the product design which is more electric driven or alternate fuels driven. So on one hand, yes, today we are also parallelly working collaboratively with the design centers across the globe, where the knowledge is more advanced. So sending our people there, getting them skilled and bringing them back, and then disseminating that knowledge at a local level. At the same time, we also see now that even in our engineering colleges, these courses have become part of the curriculum. One of the days when the automobile engineering used to be a pure play mechanical engineering branch, when we passed out of our engineering college, that has changed. So there's a change which is happening. Is the talent as abundant as it used to be from an IC engine standpoint? The answer is no. But is it really happening, and it's really getting available and getting developed, and people are working and wanting to get into it? The answer is yes. Rather, if you go to the campuses today and we tell them, no, we are hiring for our tech center, the first thing they want to do is, where are you going to put me in? Are you going to put me into the EV side of it, or are you going to put me onto the traditional technology side of it? Because their preference is to work on that EV, so that, because they also want to get into what is the future in more futuristic technology. So we are at a good place currently, and it's getting better. Is it fully there? The answer is no, but definitely that pool is growing pretty rapidly, and all organizations are working towards developing their talent towards it.
Awesome. So Amit, I have a few questions. So a two-pronged approach. You mentioned that we're just at that curve where we're about to soar high in the AV industry. So can you tell me what exactly would be needed to act as a catalyst to kind of get that push that is required to make it soar? And on the other hand, what can companies do to expand their talent pool? If they're looking for the correct talent, what kind of strategies can they employ to get the correct people on board for this?
So the first part is more on the business side. I think the organizations are pretty much now working collaboratively across competition, I would say, to build a better technology. We have collaborated with Daimler-Benz. We are a direct competition to them, Volvo and Daimler, but we have formed a joint venture company, and we are collectively developing the fuel cell technology together. So on one hand, organizations, what we are seeing in the industry is that competition is coming together because there's a larger goal to be achieved, in terms of future sustainability of the transportation industry. And there it's not about me versus you; it's about collective industry as such. So organizations are putting in their money, joining hands, and kind of developing that technology, which can be then deployed and made commercially available in the respective brands. So that's happening on the one side when you look at the business, and that's also accelerating the growth, because now it's not competing with each other; it's collaboratively developing the technology together. On the other hand, internally, organizations are now again tying up with various skill development programs. We run a large number of skill development programs to transition people from the traditional technologies to the new technologies as such. Similarly, it's about tying up with academia to understand, because a lot of technology information we also need to go take it back to the colleges, because again the professors there are the ones who passed out 23-25 years back. Generally, that's the kind of the talent pool which is there, which is teaching the students. And during those times, we never had these kind of technologies. So for them also, it's about how do we make them learn this? How do we really get them to our campuses, show them what we are doing, show them the examples of our engines, take them through the tech center, get them to intern on with us for some time, and then they go back and they understand this technology in a better way, and then they can pass it on to the students. Organizations are also now currently, some of them are directly running certain programs in some of the engineering colleges today, where they are sponsoring a few subjects apart from their regular curriculum. We see organizations are running, okay, you have 4 courses which we will design. We will have our managers who will go there and teach that along with the faculty of the college, and people who will certify. That will be like an additional certification which the students will get, and that will help them when they are sitting in their campus placements and all. So it's a larger ecosystem which has to work together, academia, industry, businesses collaborating together, and that's how we'll be able to really grow, both in terms of the technology, adoption of technology, and then ensuring that we have the right talent and we are then developing that talent.
Very interesting. I mean, the point that you made, that the goal is larger than us. It's more than the competition. It's about achieving a larger goal. And so the answer to that would be a collaboration between industry, government, and academia, right? All right.
So I know that IIT Kanpur, I guess, is doing some work, some R&D on this space, and I'm sure there are a few more institutions that are actually doing some work. So from a policy standpoint, Amit, I mean, if you were to say that, this is what we would require. I mean, I know government is doing a lot, but if there are like a couple of things that you say that these are things that will hasten, or act as a catalyst for this growth, what would those be from a policy standpoint?
I think one important piece is the larger investment by the government on the sustainable electricity generation. See, again, when we are looking at this entire transition and we get into electricity or electrification of the vehicles, there is also a thought about that if we are really building having a more coal-based energy, how is that really helping in the sustainability goals? Because somewhere the energy also has to be coming from more renewable sources. Ultimately, it's a full chain when we look at it from that standpoint. So how can we have more and more focus towards renewable energy on that? That's one. Second, from a policy standpoint, can be how can the government incentivize setting up of more charging stations? That's going to be the key piece. And third is, I would say, incentivizing research on technology for batteries which can be charged faster. Because another piece today which is kind of prohibitive is that one is availability of the state charging stations, and second is even if you have there, you still have to wait for at least for half an hour, 45 minutes, depending on what is the battery capacity. Whereas if you go to a fuel station, it takes 2 minutes or 3 minutes to get your tank full and then you move on. So how do you really able to do that, and how can government incentivize these areas? That will really help, because today, if you look at the passenger vehicles or commercial vehicles, one of the biggest challenge, if the moment you talk to anybody about saying, hey, would you like to get an electric vehicle? The first thing is charging. Where will I charge it? If it's a city driving, it's still fine, because in the evening you're again coming back to your home and maybe you have a charger. But I know some of my friends who would take their use electric vehicles only for the city driving, but for highway driving, they'll prefer to take their the normal IC engine vehicles. So how can we have support towards incentivizing a faster technology breakthrough on that? That to me would be key. Apart from that, I think government is doing a lot towards it. From the industry standpoint, I would say we are pretty much happy with the kind of support and the kind of incentivization which the government is doing towards this transition, and I think that's going to be the long-term future and more sustainable future for us.
I'm certainly excited, for this whole industry, the way it's kind of growing. I mean, in transitioning, into a sustainable, future. I mean, we'll be running out of time, but a couple of last questions, Amit. So we spoke a little bit about the supply chain aspect of it, right? I mean, we've been kind of seeing a lot of issues with the semiconductors and stuff, because China and a whole lot of other areas where automotive had a challenge. Automotive industry had a challenge in terms of manufacturing and stuff. How well oiled is the supply chain for this, in this space, with the new space that's actually coming up, or is it still, kind of trial and error sort of a thing?
See, semiconductor supply is easing up from what it used to be a few months back or a year back. I think that we have that phase where it became a big supply chain challenge is over now. The situation is pretty much easing up. As we move ahead, I think we are finding more and more better sources of rare earths which are going to be used in semiconductor industry. I was just reading a report a few weeks back about various apart from a few countries today which are kind of supplying semiconductors, that pool is going to get much more broader and bigger. So from that standpoint, I don't see it as a concern at this point of time. It's pretty much, the concern period is pretty much behind us now. The world is going to a situation where this will no longer be a constraint when it comes to ensuring that we have availability of the products, and the supply chain is not going to hinder the development or manufacturing or delivery of the vehicles as such. So pretty much the situation is much better. It's easing up, and it's easing up for better.
So even for the EV space, Amit, when you talk about the batteries and the other equipment, other material that is required for the EV space.
Yes, exactly what I said. The situation is definitely easing up. Fundamentally, it's become much better than it was a few months back.
Fantastic, excellent, Amit. So the last question, Amit, what would your message be to the fraternity, the HR fraternity, both from the industry, outside industry, your message to them?
To the industry as such, or to the fraternity, and when I'm looking at it, I'm assuming you're talking about the HR fraternity over there.
Yes.
I think two messages which I would give. Number one, absolutely be on top of understanding what your business is. Many times people just don't understand that. And as I said earlier, not just about how we make money today, but what is going to be the future of your business. If you don't have that understanding, you will never be able to make a difference, because your entire strategy would be working in isolation with what the business really wants, and that's never sustainable, or you will not get the right results. That's number one. And number two, I would say, have heart for people. Sometimes in the context of business partnering, we tend to get into a more of a business leader partnering, and I would distinguish between the two, where in the first case you're doing things which are good for the business, and the second thing you're doing things which are good for the leader, because you just want to be aligned with that. So I think if you really want to make a difference to the industry you are in, if you really want to make a difference to the people who are there in your organization, be a business partner, not a business leader partner. And because then only you will be able to have the trust on both sides, both of the employees as well as of your leadership.
Well, Amit, you're saying bring in the human aspect of the human resources really is the core there. I see. Fantastic chatting with you, Amit. Thank you for this lovely time and for a lot of insights, from the industry and from the HR leader that you are. Thank you so much indeed, Amit.
The pleasure was mine, Avinash and Samira. I think it was great interacting with you. I hope it really benefits the audience and they will get some good insights out of this.
Sure of it. Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.